can go ahead and enjoy the recording as well. So I've already started the recording. Today we have with us Mr. Perales, who is an assistant professor of kinesiology here at EPCC, and he's going to be discussing body composition or body mass index. What's the difference? Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that you can get points from the Tejano Passport program for attending these sessions. So I'm going to put a link in the chat box that you can go ahead and click on to get your points for this event. And if you would go ahead and just please keep yourself muted. And if you have a question, go ahead and use the chat function that's on the bottom right. You just click on that purple bubble and call up the chat box. You can ask questions that way, or in the middle, there is that little person raising their hand. You just click on that and raise your hand, and we'll go ahead and get to your questions. So go ahead, Jeremy, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Kristen. All right, well, welcome everybody, and thank you guys for joining in today. So I'm an assistant professor of kinesiology here at El Paso Community College at the Trans Mountain campus. And my background specifically more is in strength and conditioning, where I've done research and I've had a publication in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, which is basically looking at like nothing but strength and conditioning. Okay, so we're going to be talking a little bit about body composition, body mass index, what they are, what's the difference, and why they're important today. Okay. So again, if you have questions, please feel free to use the chat box, and I'll be looking at that, or you can raise your hand there. Okay. All right. So let's go and get started. Okay. So body composition, right? Body composition and body mass index are two different things, and sometimes the terms get mixed up quite often. Okay. So body composition, if you guys can see here, we have two photos, right? We have photos, multiple photos here. Okay. One reason in regards to body composition why people would want to pay attention to it is for appearances, aesthetics, or health, and also for athletes would be performance. Okay, so body composition is basically you're looking, you're not necessarily looking at the weight, you're looking at how much weight somebody has, how much of that weight is muscle, and how much is fat. Okay, so let's just say somebody's 6'2" and they weigh 220 pounds. Right, so BMI might say potentially that they could be overweight, right? But we want to look at their body composition to actually find out how much of that weight is muscle and how much is fat. Okay, so we want to know that because that's where the health indicators lie, right? Not necessarily by the weight, but how much fat makes up that weight. Okay, so why do we care about body composition? Okay, like I mentioned, we care about it for various reasons, right? Everybody has different reasons. For some people, it may be they want to look good, right? Some it may be they want to be healthy. Some it's directly correlated and linked to their performance. For athletes, for example, if you think of like sprinters like Usain Bolt, right? Usain Bolt and a lot of like sprinters. If you look at any 100-meter sprinters or 200-meter sprinters, college, collegiate level, or Olympics. Right, they're very lean, okay, and how lean they are is there's actually research showing it's directly correlated to their sprint performance. Okay, so that's why you're not really going to see sprinters that aren't lean, right? All the sprinters are going to be very lean. Okay, so we care about it in regards to health, we care about it in regards to athletic performance, and we care about it in regards to how we look. Okay, so let's go and move on. So that's body composition. Okay, body composition again is how much fat we have versus how much muscle we have. Okay, now body mass index, right, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with or has heard of. Body mass index basically looks at the population, right? It basically categorizes individuals as either normal, overweight, obese, or morbidly obese based solely off somebody's height and weight. Okay, so it assesses the health risk of a population. So we can say, for example, United States, we can actually go and let's say we took everybody's BMI. We can actually say, okay, like Texas has the average of this BMI, right? New Mexico has this much, right? We can take averages and say which state we could say is more obese or more overweight or falls within the normal category of body mass index. Okay, and there's you see a lot of those online. You could see like tables of the United States, and they'll show which regions are more overweight or which regions are more obese or things like that based solely off BMI. Okay, so again, it only looks at body height and weight, okay? So it actually calculates BMI based off, you would get your weight in kilograms and divide it by your height in meters square. Okay, so based off your height and weight, you're going to be classified as normal, overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. Okay, but body mass index does not differentiate, it does not distinguish between muscle and fat. Okay, so that's the main difference there, right? We said body composition tells you how much muscle somebody has and how much fat somebody has. Okay, body mass index classifies an individual as overweight or normal, obese, or morbidly obese solely based off their height and how much they weigh. Okay, so if you keep that in mind, as we move on here, right, I'm sure everybody's familiar with this athlete, right? Ezekiel Elliott. Right, I'm not a Cowboys fan. Maybe you guys are Cowboys fans, right? That's why I chose this athlete, because seems like more people are Cowboys fans, right? But I just pulled his information up off Google, right? So it says he's 6 feet, and it says he's 225 pounds. Okay, so based off his information of 6 feet tall and he weighs 225 pounds, I went to I believe it was the CDC. And I punched in his information on a body mass index calculator. Okay, I'm sure you guys have seen these before. You can Google body mass index calculator, and all you do is you punch in your height, and it might ask you for your height in feet and inches, and it's going to ask you for your weight. Okay, so that's all I did. I using Ezekiel Elliott's information, you guys look over to the right of the screen, it says for the information you entered, it says height 6 feet, weight 225 pounds. Okay, and here, this is Ezekiel Elliott's information. It's saying your BMI is 30.5, indicating your weight is in the obese category for adults of your age, right? So I used Ezekiel Elliott's information. I put his information into a BMI calculator, and it calculated him and classified him as obese, right? But if we look at him, he doesn't look obese, right? So that's where it can get kind of tricky, okay? And also where we can kind of think we may be healthy when we might not be. Okay, for example, Ezekiel Elliott, based off BMI, he's classified as obese. And that's something you're actually going to see with a lot of athletes, okay? Because a lot of athletes are going to weigh more than they should based off BMI. Okay, so BMI, again, only looks at height and weight. It does not tell you how much of that weight is muscle and how much is fat, right? So Ezekiel Elliott, if we actually assess his body composition, right? So again, body composition looks and lets us know how much of the weight is fat and how much is muscle. So if we actually assessed and tested his body composition, he might have 7% body fat, right? So that's what the difference is. And that's what we want to look at primarily. They both are important, but they both have two different roles. Okay, so that was just an example for you guys. And here we're going to go through some various tools and assessments we can use to assess anthropometric measurements, okay, to actually assess like BMI, things like that, and also how to assess body composition, some various tools and methodologies that we can use to assess body composition. So I'm going to be going through those right now. So anthropometric measurements, everyone's taken those before. Okay, every time you guys go to the doctor's office, you probably take those, right? They might take your height and weight, okay, things like that. They have probably step on the scale. Okay, those are normal things you probably do regularly. Okay, measurements of human body fat dimensions, right? They're non-invasive. So non-invasive means it's not going into the vein, right? They're not doing any pricking or prodding, right? Quantitative techniques, so we can have a numerical value to it. So height and weight, when they take your height, they're getting a numerical value. They're quantifying your height. Okay? Weight, right? When you step on the scale, you're getting a quantitative value. You're getting a number. Okay, whether it's kilograms or whether it's pounds. Body circumference, you guys can actually do measurements, right, with a tape measure. You can take a tape measure and measure around your waist, your hips, right, the chest, arms, whatever it may be. Those would be anthropometric measurements because they're non-invasive, right? They're not pricking, poking, or prodding you, right, with anything. All right. So how do we assess body composition? Okay, so again, body composition is what we would utilize to actually assess the difference between muscle and fat, how much muscle somebody has versus how much fat somebody has. Okay, so I'm going to go through some ways we can test it and some of the pros and cons of them. And if you notice there's a list, so we're going to go through each bullet point. and it says BMI and waist to hip, right? It says those do not assess body composition. Okay, but I'm going to talk about what those are again. Okay, and off to the right, you see that picture. I'm pretty sure everybody's seen that, right? A pound of fat and a pound of muscle. One's more dense, right? Muscle's denser versus fat. Okay, so we're going to go through this list here. And as we go through, you guys can see at the bottom of the screen, it says gold standard cadaver analysis, right? So cadaver analysis means somebody would have to be somebody would be dead. That's basically where we can actually find out if somebody was if we had a body, right? If we had a cadaver, then we can actually assess with 100% accuracy how much fat and muscle somebody had, because you actually have fat within the muscle. So they'd actually have to go in there and measure it, right? That's 100% accuracy. So say, for example, somebody wanted to know, like, hey man, I'm like 2% body fat. That's 100% accurate. We wouldn't want to know that, right? If it was 100% accurate, because we'd have to be dead to find out what our 100% accuracy body composition is. Okay, so we don't want that, right? We don't want to have to do that to find out. So the most accurate alternatives while we're alive is two things. We have one that's called hydrostatic weighing, which is you guys maybe seen this in movies or on sports channels or something, where the athlete actually is submerged in water. They're in a tank and they go underwater. That's called hydrostatic weighing. That's the most accurate alternative to cadaver analysis, right? So it's only plus or 2% off a cadaver. So say a cadaver analysis, say somebody was like 6% body fat on cadaver analysis. Well, with hydrostatic weighing, they could be anywhere from 4 to 8%, right, body fat, because it can be plus or minus 2 off cadaver. And then we have what's called BOD-POD, and that's plus or minus 2% off of hydrostatic. And we're going to go through each of these specifically. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to type in the chat box and or just raise that the little hand you see on the bar there. Okay? All right, so body mass index we already talked about, right? They basically assess individuals solely based off height and weight. Okay, so here you guys see two pictures. Both pictures are showing the exact same thing. It's just two different pictures. Okay, so if you look at the top one, it has like a bodybuilder, and then the bottom one has a sumo wrestler and then a bodybuilder. Okay, so for both pictures, it's showing height. So for all 4 of these guys on the pictures, right, the height is all 6 feet. So they're all 6 feet tall. They all weigh 250 pounds. Okay? So on paper, they're identical. Okay? According to BMI, body mass index, all 4 of these guys here are identical, right? There's nothing different about them because they all have a BMI of 33.9. Okay, and I believe that falls in with, I believe it falls under obese. Okay, so if you can see, even though on paper they're all the same, right? Based off BMI, they're all the same. They're all 6 feet tall. They're all 250 pounds. So they're all classified as obese. But if we look at them, we see a difference, and we do, right? We see that the bodybuilders, right? They're lean, right? They look more musculature, right? You see the musculature, it's defined, right? Versus the guy in the sweatpants and the sweatsuit, and also the sumo wrestler, right? So again, if we actually want to look at body composition, so we can clearly see these guys look different, but on paper, according to BMI, they're exactly the same. That's why we want to make sure we also go into body composition, because body composition will let us know, for example, which person has more body fat. Okay, because when we talk about health indicators such as type 2 diabetes or obesity-related diseases, it's going to be associated with how much body fat there is. Okay. All right, so again, body mass index does not differentiate, it does not distinguish between muscle and fat. All right, so we have, again, the second bullet point we're going through was waist to hip. So waist to hip doesn't tell you how much body fat you have. What it can do is it basically lets you know how you store your body fat. Okay, so waist to hip, you would do 2 measurements. You would take a measurement on your waist, and you go around the narrowest part of the waist, which is right above the umbilicus, which is your belly button. You would measure around that, and you would take that measurement, and then you would measure around the widest part of the hips, which is around the glutes, or around the buttocks, okay? So you take that measurement, you put in a formula, you calculate basically how you store it, and whether or not you're at risk of obesity-related diseases. Okay, so again, this doesn't tell you how much body fat you have, it just lets you know how you store it. Whether you store it in the abdomen section, or whether you store it in the hips. Okay, so we can't really decide how we store our body fat. Unfortunately, that's going to be decided by genetics, right? Genetics plays a part in how we store it. So I always say, like, if you got good genes, right, then you store it, like, not Levi's, right? If you have good genes, then you're going to store it in the hips. But if we don't have such good genes, you know, or in this situation, then we're going to store it in the abdomen section. Okay, so both, we don't want to have excess body fat regardless, right? We don't want to have excess body fat in the abdomen section or the hips, but if we were able to have a choice, we'd probably want to go with the hips, okay? Because when we store it in the hips, we're less at risk of developing obesity-related diseases or having any or developing type 2 diabetes, okay? Versus if we store it in the abdomen section. If we store it in the abdomen, so like in the belly, then we're increased risk of obesity-related diseases and also type 2 diabetes, okay? So both, we don't want to have excess body fat, not too much. We want to have a certain amount, but not too much because it's not good. But again, if we had a choice, we want to store it in the hips. Okay, and here is just a form. So you see it's Anthropo Testing. So anthropometric is, like, if you guys remember, it's non-invasive, meaning there's no pricking, poking, or prodding, right? So here I just put a little thing of how we would actually do a waist to hip measurement, right? It tells you the purpose of a waist to hip ratio measurement, tells you the purpose of it, tells you the equipment you need, right? Just a tape measure. It tells you the procedure, and basically you would punch in your information there, and you would find out what your risk category is off to the right. Okay, if you guys see off to the right, there's two tables. Okay, so say for example, I measure my waist and I measure my hip, right? Let's just say I got a measurement of, let's just say I got a measurement of 0.93. Okay, so I would go off to the right and I would look at that top table where it says waist to hip circumference ratio, standards for men and women. And I'm going to go see, it says men. I'm 30 years old, so I'm going to look at the 30 to 39. So let's just say I got a measurement of 0.93. So if I look over, 0.93 falls within high risk, okay? So what that's letting me know is how I'm storing my body fat. Again, waist to hip doesn't tell us how much, it just tells us where we store it. So this is kind of a cheap way to assess your health by using a waist to hip measurement because you can kind of track, right? So say if I was 0.93, well, it lets me know I'm at high risk of developing type 2 diabetes and obesity-related diseases. So then maybe I should start maybe changing the way I exercise or how I eat, right? Look at my diet, look at my exercise, modify, and then I can track my progress and do another waist to hip ratio assessment later down and then kind of move that from 0.93 into something like, let's just say 0.90, which would be moderate risk for my age group, okay? So that's a cheap way we can kind of monitor our health by using waist to hip, using a waist to hip ratio. Okay, so again, all you need for that is a tape measure. All right. So again, the first two things we talked about, body mass index and waist to hip, do not assess body composition, right? They don't tell you how much body fat you have. They just tell you, you know, BMI just classifies people based off height and weight. And then our waist to hip measurement only tells us how we store it, right? Where we store it doesn't tell us how much we have. Okay. So now we're going to go into some instruments we can use to actually tell us how much body fat we have and how much muscle we have. Okay. So one of the first piece of equipment we're going to talk about is Skinfold Calipers. And maybe you guys have seen these before. Gyms will use them. Colleges, universities will use them. The main thing for this is it's a tool for assessing body composition. And measurements are always taken on the right side of the body. They're never taken on the left unless somebody has like let's just say an amputation or there's an injury or okay. Y'all hear me? Sorry. I think I cut out for a second.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so we always do the measurements on the right side of the body for consistency across labs, like across not just here in the US, but across the world. So if you guys think, like, I always use the example of track and field, right? So we think of football, like American football, like the NFL, right? They don't use meters, right? They say yards. Okay, but if we look at track, right, track and field, they say meters, right? They don't say yards. And they do that for consistency, right? Because track and field is a universal sport. It's not just in one country. Okay, so same thing here. Research is done all across the world. It's not just done in one country. So they're always going to use the right side of the body for the Skinfold calipers unless there's a burn or a injury or amputation. But then they'll use the left side. But they use various things. You're going to basically take measurements. There's a 7-site measurement you can use, which they're going to take various points of the body and measure. A 3-site for males and a 3-site for females. Okay, and this piece of equipment is really accurate. It can be very accurate. It just depends on who's doing the assessment. Okay, so for example, if somebody's been doing this for years, right, and they were trained properly on how to do it, then you could probably get a fairly accurate reading with Skinfold calipers, and they're cheaper, right? Some of the stuff we're going to talk about later is going to be very expensive. Some can be like $30, some can be $400, depending on what type of calipers you buy. But they're very quick, right? So for example, when I was a student at UTEP, I would help out with testing the high school wrestlers. So all the high school wrestlers would come to UTEP and we would assess their body composition. And we would use these because we'd see over like 1,000 students, right? We'd see over 1,000 wrestlers and we'd be going through them really quick, right? Just kind of going one, next one, right? Writing down their measurements. And, because these are quick, right? So these things are quick. You can put them in a drawer. They're very convenient for gyms. They're very quick and accessible. The downside with these is you have to know how to use them. If you don't know how to use them well, it can be very inaccurate. If you know how to use them well, it can be very accurate. But also you have to know when and how to use them. So if I have a client, the Skinfold calipers only open so wide. Okay, so if I have a client who's maybe more overweight, or they have more excess body fat, right? And I know the calipers won't work because they're not going to open wide enough, then I don't necessarily want to grab the calipers. I want to use another instrument to measure, okay? Because that can be discouraging, right? If I know the calipers aren't going to work, then I don't want to use those because that can be discouraging to the client or to the patient or whoever I'm working with. Okay, so I want to use something else. Much like we have, you guys can think of like taking time, right? Like sprinting. If you've seen the NFL Combine, they have stopwatches, but they're also using what's called timing gate systems. So we have multiple things to measure speed, right? We can use a timing gate system or we can use a stopwatch. One of them is more accurate. Same thing here. We have multiple ways we can assess the same thing, right? But we have to take in consideration how practical is it? Am I going to be assessing a lot of people? And who's my client? If I know the calipers aren't going to work, then I don't actually want to use those, right? Because it might be discouraging to the individual. Okay, so here's another form of instrumentation we can use. Okay, you guys have probably seen this one. Maybe you've done it. They used to have it in GNC back in, when I was 20 or 18, I used to go to the Bassett Center. They had the BMI thing in front of GNC. And you see a picture of it there where you see a female standing on the BIA. So BIA is what's called a bioelectrical impedance analysis. This one, it's cheap and convenient, but some can be expensive, right? Some of these things could be $400 or even $1,000, but some can be as cheap as, $20, $30, right? And these are also very convenient for gyms. You might have done these in the gym. You might have done these maybe in a supplement store. Now, the important thing with this is to know how to use it and to know how it works. Okay, so I don't necessarily want to just hand it to somebody and tell them do it, right? And then say, oh, look, you got these numbers. I want to know how it works so I can explain to them how it works. So that way they're well informed of what their readings are, why their readings appear that way, right? And how can we work on it? Okay, so these are cheap, fast, convenient. You'll see them. You can get them at Walmart. The scales, they sell them in scales now where it tells you your body fat. But what BIA does is it sends a small electrical current through your body. And so the way the electrical current works, so for example, good conductors of electricity are water and muscle mass. Okay, so like I just said, water is a good conductor of electricity and lean muscle mass. Okay, so the way to manipulate this machine is to drink a lot of water, right? So I know that now, right? When I was in school, I know that now. So if I want to make myself feel better, I'll drink a lot of water to kind of try and manipulate this. But that's the downside, right? If we don't know how it works, if I'm in a gym and I just give it to a client, I have to take into consideration, did they use the restroom, Right? Did they work out? Did they drink water? What did they eat? Right? A lot of things affect this machine. Okay, so again, if you didn't drink enough water, and you're underhydrated, then it can be picked up as excess body fat. Right? So if you notice here, it says fat mass is not a good conductor of electricity. Right? So if you're underhydrated, then it's going to appear as excess body fat. Okay, so those are important things to know. And also, this thing is influenced by a lot of factors, whether you ate something, whether you drank something, whether you exercised, whether you didn't exercise, right? And so there's a lot of limitations with it. But it gives you a ballpark number, right? But it can be up to 8 to 12% off. Okay, so but it does give you a ballpark number, and that's what we want to try. As let's just say if you're using these and you're working with a client, or if you yourself take this and take a measurement. You want to take it as don't think of it as like this is 100% accurate. It can be 8% off, and it's also influenced by what you eat, drink, you exercise, you didn't exercise, but it gives you a ballpark number, right? So it gives you something to work with, and we can all work on something, and we can kind of keep track. It's an easy, cheaper way to keep track of our body composition. It's not by any means the most accurate. This one, as you could probably tell, is a lot more expensive. Okay, so this one is pretty expensive. You won't really see it too much, right? UTEP has one. I know they have one like in, I believe in biometrics on the west side, I think has one. So these you're going to see more in hospital settings and also exercise labs or exercise science laboratories. You'll see these more where they're testing athletes or where they're doing research with older populations or any populations, and they're looking at body composition. And this one is a very accurate one. As I mentioned when we started, I said cadaver analysis is the 100% accurate one, right? But nobody wants to do that because at that point, it doesn't matter how much body fat we have. Okay? But BOD-POD was one of the most accurate alternatives. Okay, so this one is really nice because the other ones we went over, such as Skinfold and stuff, you have to do some math, right? You have to punch in your numbers into some equations called the Syrian-Brozek equations. But with this, what's nice about it is the computer does everything for you. It's a lot more expensive, right? But the computer does everything for you, gives you a printout, and you feel pretty cool, right? I mean, when I did it in college, you feel like you're going to space. You sit in a little chamber, right? And it uses what's called air displacement. Okay, so a motivator here for people would be like they'd want to wear the minimal amount of clothing possible. So usually people are wearing compression shorts or bathing suits, right? And you see the guy in the photo, he's wearing a swim cap. Okay, the reason for that is to compress the hair, right? Because you have air molecules trapped within your hair. Okay, so that's why they wear that, because that excess trapped air that's within your hair is going to be picked up as excess body fat. So here, ideally, they want to wear compression shorts. They want to, maybe shave, things like that. I mean, it's not going to be a lot more different, but the hair on the head will, but like the beard and stuff, people will kind of shave. That's not going to make a huge difference, but it does influence it. Okay, so this uses what's called air displacement, and it's very accurate, but it's not necessarily practical for a lot of people, right? If we had to test 30 people, or let's just say I use the example of when I was at UTEP, I had to test high school wrestlers, so we had hundreds come a day, and we'd go through them really quick. If we tried using this, it wouldn't necessarily be practical because we'd actually have to calibrate it in between each person. So there, you have to actually calibrate it in between each individual, and it takes some time. Okay, so it's not necessarily like a very practical one to use. If you only have 5 people, then this is a great instrument. And obviously, if you have the facility for it, and if you have you could say the opportunity to use it, because not everyone gets the opportunity to actually use this. And then this one was the most accurate one. Okay, so if you remember from the beginning, I said there was 2 more accurate alternatives. We had BOD-POD and we had hydrostatic weighing. Hydrostatic weighing is actually the most accurate alternative to cadaver analysis. Okay, it can be plus or minus 2% off cadaver analysis. And this one is really fun to do. Okay, I used to do this one a lot and do testing with this one. The only issue with this one is if you have a fear of being in a confined space and putting your head beneath water. Okay, that happens, right? So that can be a little harder to do then. Okay, so with this one, it uses Archimedes' principle, right? There's also equations you have to do. So this one, there's math that you have to do. You have to punch numbers you get. Basically, you're getting the water, so you're getting the density, you're getting the temperature, you're punching in the water temperature, the density, and all these things into formulas, and you're going to calculate your body density, and then from there, calculate your body fat. Okay, so with this one, you do 3 trials. Okay, they usually do 3 trials. So if you see the picture on the bottom right, it looks like a shopping cart. I always think of it like when I've done it, like as a subject or a participant, I always felt like produce, because that scale kind of looks like the scale in the produce aisle, right? When you're buying like fruits or vegetables, right? But you sit in a chair, you sit on a bar, like you see there's a bar where you see the female, she's in a different seat versus the guy, he's like in a PVC made one, right? Homemade. Okay, and at UTEP when I did it, it's just a PVC bar, right? So the idea of this is to, I don't know if any of you guys did this, you can, maybe put in the chat box if you did or not. When I did, I always explain this when I was explaining it to somebody when I was telling them how to do it. So I'd be like the guy outside the water, and I was gonna say we're doing 3 trials, and we're gonna get 3 trials of this, right? So I would tell them, I want you to take a deep breath and go on under the water and make as many bubbles as you can until you stop, right? And kind of imagine yourself, like, I don't know if you guys did this when you were kids, like chill at the bottom of the pool and just watch life go by. Where when I was a kid, I used to let all the air out and just chill and see how long you could sit at the bottom of the pool. That's kind of what you want to do here, right, in this kind of test, because the goal is to sink, right? We don't want to force or push the bar or the chair down. We want our body weight to actually take the chair or the bar down. Okay, so because again, muscle's dense, muscle's going to sink. Okay, so we don't want to float, okay, because the excess body fat's going to make us float. So with this, that's a motivator to actually get people to, to let all their air out. I'm like, hey man, if you don't let all your air out, right, it's going to be picked up as excess body fat. So that's the con of it, is that if they don't let all their air out, then it's going to be picked up as excess body fat. And also if there's like a fear of being in a confined space, because these are, if you see the pictures, they're kind of tight spaces. Okay, so usually they're going underwater and they're counting on the person doing the test to let them know when to come up. And we tell them, like, when I've done it, I'll tell them, hey, I'll knock on the tank when I get the reading. But if you cannot breathe and if you need to come up, just come up, right? The tank is not deep. It's everyone can actually stand in it. So you always tell them, hey, just stand up, right, if you need to. But this is the most accurate one. And as you probably noticed, it's not cheap. This one's not cheap either. It requires a lot of water, and it is expensive, right? Whether you do a homemade one, right? Getting that much water, okay, it can be pricey, and you don't see these everywhere. Okay? These are also found like in more in like athletic facilities, like at colleges and universities for research purposes, or athletic facilities, things like that. But you really won't see these like in gyms, right? Gyms are going to carry more than likely local gyms, and gyms you have just people go work out in. You're going to see more of the calipers, because they're quick, fast, and easy. You can just put them in a desk drawer. Or the BIA, right? BIA is another one that's quick, fast, and easy. You can just put it in a desk drawer. It's more convenient, right? These ones you can't just carry around with you, right? These are obviously have to be stationary. They're more accurate, and they can also cost money. Some of them can be very expensive to do. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next one, which I believe is, yes, the Dexa Scan. Okay, so Dexa Scan, this one looks pretty pricey, and it is, right? So some of these assessments that I'm mentioning, I've mentioned a few of them that I said you can find them more like in a hospital setting or clinical setting, not really in gyms as much, right? These are going to be pricey to do, right? So the students, when you guys transfer to university, sometimes you get the opportunity to be to participate in a research study. And that's really cool to do. And I would encourage you guys to volunteer in research studies, because you get to learn a lot, and you get to use some equipment or be tested on some equipment that's very expensive if you want to do otherwise, right? Or you get it for free because you're a student and you're being a participant in a research study. Right? So Dexa Scan, I've done one when I was a student in grad school, and I used it for my research when I was doing sprint training research. And the cool thing about this one is the primary function of it is not body composition. The primary function of Dexa is to actually assess bone mineral density. Right? So how dense are your bones, right? And you can actually see there from the image, you can see the skeleton, right? So it's kind of cool because this is what you get, right? When I did it, I got to print out my skeleton and it looked like this, and you get all this cool stuff. And it tells you how dense your bones are, and that's good to know, right? Because obviously, if we don't have enough bone density, if we don't have good bone health, we can develop things like osteoporosis and other conditions. Okay, so we want to monitor that as well. So that's the primary function of DEXA. An additional perk to it is it assesses body fat percentage or body composition of each region of the body. Okay, so just because it's more expensive does not mean it's more accurate, right? The hydrostatic weighing is the most accurate, and then BOD-POD, and then probably Skinfold Calipers, depending on who's doing it. But DEXA, the nice thing, it's fairly accurate, but the nice thing about it is you can actually tell how much body fat somebody has in each region of the body. For that, I mean, if you look at the photo, you could probably see it says legs, it says trunk, right? And I can't read the rest, but it has each region of the body. It tells you how much body fat somebody has, let's just say in their torso, or in their upper left thigh, or upper right thigh, or stomach or abdominal region or whatever. It tells you how much body fat is in each specific region of the body. Okay, and for me, I use that for sprint performance. That was a good tool for me to use because I'd read a lot of research showing that sprint performance was correlated with greater upper thigh circumference. So upper thigh circumference means, well, the greater the circumference of their upper thigh, the faster their sprint performance. That's what the research said. But we use this to actually identify, because if I just say circumference, it's telling me how wide somebody's upper thigh is, but it doesn't say how much is muscle and how much is fat. And that's why I use the Dexa Scan to actually assess the upper thigh of people when they were sprinting, right? Well, not when they're sprinting, but we would assess them during their sprint training to see if that was accurate, right? So if they had more lean muscle mass in the upper thigh, did it mean they were going to have better sprint performance versus somebody who had more body fat in the upper thigh? Okay, so Dexa Scan is a pretty cool instrument to use, and it's fun to do. And then here, why do we measure? Right, both body composition and BMI are utilized for health. Okay, so body composition, ideally we want to go off. I always say go off body composition. I like using body composition because somebody can get or just have a misconception saying, for example, if I fell into the normal category. For example, right now, if I do a BMI, I'm going to be obese, right? But I know I'm healthy, like, because I know my body composition, my body fat percentage is like last time I did it was like 11%. So I know I'm okay because I don't, I'm not in the range. I'm in the range where I need, where it's good, right? So, but I can have the misconception of just because I even fall into let's say I fall into the normal category on BMI, on body mass index. Okay, there's people who fall into the normal category on BMI, but they can have 30% body fat, right? So that's why it's good to do both, right? The reason we use, like, for example, BMI is to assess, like I mentioned, the beginning photo, we saw Ezekiel Elliott, and based off Ezekiel Elliott's information, he was classified as obese. He's clearly healthy based off his body composition. But for a majority of people, right, if we were to take the BMI and use it across the U.S., right, across all 50 states, well, if a majority of people fall into the category of obese, it's not very likely that everyone's going to be like Ezekiel Elliott, right? It's going to be a smaller percentage, for example, of those who fall into that category and would be healthy because they have a lower body fat percentage. So that's why we still use it, because again, a majority of the people, if they fall into the obese category, well, chances are they probably do have excess body fat. Okay, but that's why we don't always just want to go off BMI. We want to use body composition as well to be you can say like a secondary source, and vice versa. Okay, so we use both. They both assess risk, right, for obesity and obesity-related diseases. And it can allow for prescription for desirable body weight. Okay, and for me personally, I don't like using the term weight. I like looking at the body fat percentage and the muscle, because that's, again, where the health indicators lie. If somebody has an excess amount of body fat, well, then we're going to have an increased risk of like obesity-related diseases and type 2 diabetes, versus if they have less body fat, regardless of how much they weigh, right? But they might have some other issues, but that's why we want to use both. Okay, so, but knowing them, then we use them in fitness centers, weight loss programs, right, training, and overall health and wellness. It's good to know For example, where we're at, we can monitor our progress easily by using some of these things, like I mentioned, even the waist to hip. You can assess yourself, right, regularly to see where you're at, if you're progressing, and also if you're degressing, right, if you're not improving. Okay, so these things we do, and again, it's for benefiting our health, so it's a good way to keep track. So, I mean, just to finish it off, again, we want to encourage looking at both, right, body mass index and body composition. So let me go on to the next slide. And then here you guys see there's some tables for you. Okay. It just tells you recommended body compositions, right? So for again, body composition, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, is how much muscle and body fat you have, right? Versus BMI classifies somebody as overweight, obese, or whatever, solely based off their height and weight. So body composition wise, males want to be below 20% body fat, females between 16 and 25. And then on the right, there's some more in-depth information regarding where you should be also by age. Okay. All right. Well, that pretty much concludes it. Okay. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask the chat box or raise your hand. Okay. I do appreciate you guys stopping by.
Does anybody have questions? Go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah, I just have a question. Is there going to be in the future maybe a virtual event about diet, like macros and how to do all that?
Oh, well, we sure can. That's suggestions that you have. Go ahead.
Okay, so that'd be a great idea, Brent. So you're talking like just the macronutrients. We can cover. So another thing we do talk about is substrate utilization, and what that is basically how you utilize carbohydrates and fats during exercise. Now, in regards to if you're talking about specifically how much macros you would need here and there, that'd be more from a nutritional aspect, and we can definitely look into. I think that'd be great to have like a nutritionist come and talk on that. In regards to like how you utilize carbohydrates and fat for fuel, that's something we could present on as well too, like in regards to performance.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that'd be a good connection with this.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome, because in the spring, so maybe we can have Mr. Palace come back. Thank you for your suggestions. I thank you very much from the kinesiology department, and thank you for the entire department. This is great. This is great information. Most of that, this is all great information. I never had heard a lot of those different techniques, so thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you coming, and I thank you to everybody else who came also to hear. You'll see on the Tejano passport, and I have put you can get points for coming today. We will be having some more great sessions, and that is going to be get that flyer up for you. We're having the Valle Verde for domain, and on Friday on these grounding techniques for being in the and to all of the kinesiology department, we appreciate it. And I hope you guys, so thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. I really appreciate it. That was great.
Oh, no worries, Kristen. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, anytime, just let me know. I actually really that was cool. I enjoyed that. So anytime you need a
We don't
present.
have more than ever today, so this is really something they're interested in. Mostly it's usually libraries.
Yeah, let me know if you guys have it again. I can do some on like what Brendan was suggesting there on the carbohydrates and stuff like that.
That's awesome. I had no idea what he was asking. Macros, so I'm glad you do specialty. So.
Yeah, no worries. So,
So awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
anytime.
Weekend.